even if you just think of like a straight male who's like scrawny, but the way he views masculinity is like a real strong man, he'll like, that could make you feel like, oh man, I'm weak, I'm lesser than a man. And doing something like going to the gym and getting a stronger body that more so matches up with the way you see masculinity can help you feel better. So then if you extrapolate that to people who are trans who are experiencing gender dysphoria, it's the same thing. It's just that their gender doesn't align with their physical body.
Some of the surgeries do have some unpleasant side effects. Not at like, it's not more often than not, but it's more frequent than it should be, in my opinion. But I'm also kind of just skeptical of the prospect of separating sex and gender in the first place.
I think separating sex and gender is really useful. I think just in the context of communication, gender is pretty, to me, obviously, I would say like a social construct, and it kind of fits a different role than I would say sex does. Mm-hmm. I think that there are some contexts where relying on sex over gender is important. Don't get me wrong, like medically, I think that's important, but I think socially it's like a different conversation. I would disagree also, though, that there's not like studies, I guess, to support. I think that there's studies with pretty good follow-ups, especially if you look at like the hormone therapies and things that people take. There's like long-term studies on people who took them for other reasons. And so like the medicines themselves are proven to be rather safe. And then there's studies of multiple years that show pretty strong benefits in terms of like mental health outcomes.
Yeah. You mean like hormone blockers and hormone therapies?
Yeah, like GnRHA or whatever, the kind of hormone therapy that is used. There's like people who used it for, what is it, like the early onset puberty, whatever it's the medical term for it is.
Puberty blockers were used before.
Yeah. And there's pretty long-term data on those being safe, being reversible, because obviously they've been used for other conditions for a while. And that's the case for a lot of these medicines. It's just new to being used, I guess, to treat like for gender affirming care.
Yeah, that's my main thing. I'm not like skeptical about the actual efficacy of hormone blockers or whether they're safe or not, but more just the long-term impact that they have specifically for transgender individuals.
Well, I would think it just logically makes sense, because I think that in terms of like gender dysphoria, this is something that like anyone can experience. And I think like a good way to explain it is like, even if you just think of like a straight male who's like scrawny, but the way he views masculinity is like a real strong man, he'll like, that could make you feel like, oh man, I'm weak, I'm lesser than a man. And doing something like going to the gym and getting a stronger body that more so matches up with the way you see masculinity can help you feel better. That's like the case for so many just normal, just straight men, not like no trans involved, nothing like that. So then if you extrapolate that to people who are trans who are experiencing gender dysphoria, it's the same thing. It's just that their gender doesn't align with their physical body.
Well, sure, but they will extend that to sex characteristics like top and bottom surgery, which is where my main skepticism towards separating sex and gender is, because I don't think you can simultaneously separate them and say that procedures that change sex characteristics are gender affirming care. Do you understand what I mean?
Sure. And I think there's conversations to be had there, but like you're not having bottom surgeries when you're a minor. And then top surgeries.
Oh, no, I mean, I never said that. I was just saying in general.
Okay, well, I guess then if you mean for like adults, my thing is like, I guess adults could do whatever. So I guess it's just not, to me, it's not as interesting as the conversation. Because like when you're an adult, you could, as far as I'm concerned, do whatever you want, if you're not going to harm other people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not really concerned about what the people are actually doing. I'm just more skeptical of whether it's coherent with the idea of separating sex and gender.
Sure. Well, it's gender affirming care is to treat gender dysphoria. And the thing that causes gender dysphoria for trans people is that their gender identity doesn't line up with their phenotypic sex.
Well, sure. But would you say then that the gender identity of woman naturally comes from the female sex then?
No, but I think that there's part of gender or in terms of like acceptance that is socially conditioned and the way that society sees women, and that society like pushes gender norms on us from a very young age that women, play with Barbies and wear dresses and like pink and all of this can kind of condition people to see women that way. And then that kind of causes the pressure for people to want to do so.
Well, sure, those are more outward behaviors of like what people would consider femininity. But I'm talking about like bottom surgery. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get the point that you're making. I just think that there's a lot of things that go into gender identity. And I do think some of it is phenotypic traits, which would be things like your reproductive organs. I just think like it's the same, like I said, like for a guy, if he's like, oh, I need to have a beard so I look like a man. I need to have big muscles so I look like a man. Sometimes a woman, a trans woman would be like, maybe I need breasts so I look like a woman. I need this so I look like a woman. And it's just having these physical traits that line up with how you see yourself in your head.